It's hugely encouraging for me to consider that all my favourite characters in this world, fictional and factual, are without exception ferocious individualists. This is the human way. This is the way of the Pathwalker. And one such imaginal character is to be found in the writings of Arthur Conan Doyle. I have a great fondness for Conan Doyle and his writing. As a boy, I used to watch these old black and white Sherlock Holmes films with my dad. These were the movies from the 1940s starring Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. Sort of Sherlock Holmes film noir, really. Still very enjoyable today they are. I watched a bunch of them the other day. And it was these productions that really got me into reading Doyle's original Sherlock Holmes texts. Beautifully composed and finely crafted stories. Entertaining, perceptive, refined, but above all, insightful writings. Oh my goodness. 56 short stories and 4 novels. That's it. Full of little philosophical gems and magnificent portraits of human nature. That's the real value of it for me. Not necessarily the escapism, but what is being put in there is real. Not just the matter of the crime being solved, but the occasion that it provides for explorations of human motives and thoughts and deeds. I'm not going to delve deeply into the history of Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle and the whole background of Sherlock Holmes, save to say that Holmes was based on real observations of a real man. A man that Doyle knew called Dr. Joseph Bell, who was a Scottish medical man of the late 19th century. So Holmes's presence and inspiration were reflections of the real experiences of Doyle himself. Though we know that in later years Dr. Bell wrote to Conan Doyle and said, "You are yourself Sherlock Holmes, and well you know it." So there's another view on that as well. And one thing I love about Doyle, although he's on the surface quite an old-fashioned man, was that he wrote very bravely as well as pleasingly. He had Holmes tending to a notable drug habit, for example. Holmes was a user of cocaine and morphine, particularly when he had no cases and was subject to bouts of depressing immobility. And he smoked copious amounts of tobacco, often instead of eating food. He even classified some of his problems into the number of pipes he would need to smoke to consider these problems. And Dr. Watson, of course, was maddened by Holmes's narcotic indulgences. It all seemed precariously stupid to him, because he cared deeply about Holmes. He was closer to him than anyone else had ever been.
What is it tonight? Morphine or cocaine?
Well, I can strongly recommend a 7% solution of cocaine. Would you care to try it?
No, indeed. I speak not only as your friend, but as a medical man. How can you risk such damage to the great powers with which you have been endowed?
I cannot tell you how it clarifies and stimulates the mind.
Yes, and destroys it in time.
My mind rebels at stagnation. Give me problems. Give me work. Give me the most abstruse cryptogram, the most intricate analysis, and I'm in my proper atmosphere. Then I can dispense with artificial stimulants. But I abhor the dull routine of existence. I crave mental exaltation. That is why I've chosen my own profession, or rather, created it, for I am the only one in the world.
The only unofficial detective.
The only unofficial consulting detective. I take no credit in my cases. The work itself, the pleasure of finding a field for my particular powers, is my highest reward. You can close that drawer. You have made the wrong diagnosis, Doctor. I have my stimulant here.
What is this?
Yes, I must get ready for my visitor. It came by the morning post.
And those voices you just heard were David Burke as Watson and the mind-blowing talent of Jeremy Brett as Holmes. The ultimate, definitive and unrivaled portrayal. A pleasure to watch from one moment to the next. And gladly, Brett made lots of Holmes stories over 10 years with Granada Television, with great writing and production from John Hawksworth and Michael Cox. I would thoroughly recommend that you look into that. Really, the creation of Holmes was a distraction to Doyle. In 1891, Doyle wrote concerning Holmes that he takes my mind from better things. So Doyle tried to kill him off, spoiler alert here, with Holmes plunging to his death at the Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland, together with his nemesis, Professor Moriarty. But the public were much more attached to Holmes than Doyle had imagined. They did not like their hero being dispatched like this. Holmes had transcended the little adventures of Victorian England and had become something more. He had escaped the imagination of the page, as so many great characters do. He had freed himself from Doyle's pen and had gone into the world all of his own accord. The consciousness which the public had lavished upon Holmes had created this independent reality tunnel for him. And so Doyle was obliged to bring him back to life a few years later. First there was the prequel of The Hound of the Baskervilles, and then in 1903 there was The Adventure of the Empty House, which explained what happened at the Reichenbach Falls and all kinds of interesting other things as well. And so this is a bit like, oh right, Neil Kramer likes Sherlock Holmes, what's that got to do with anything? You'll see that in a minute. You'll see why there's a lovely synchronous duality here. And all of it with your best mate, your best friend, your most excellent buddy. Whether you place yourself as Holmes or Dr. John H. Watson, you are with your dearest and most trusted friend, who would take a bullet for you anytime, anywhere, anyhow. And this level of true friendship is most lovingly and warmly illustrated in these tales. In a safe way, yeah? In a way that repressed Englishmen can handle. This huge fondness of one man for another, our friendship, deep, abiding companionship. It's great. As I say, however, there is another, more important layer to these works, and it is a layer of meaning and revelation that derives from Doyle's personal passion for metaphysical matters. Something he was later to explore in much greater depth in terms of the budding spiritualist movement, and even in such strange matters as mythical beings and nature spirits and so on.
On the question of my taking up this psychic matter, curiously enough, my first experiences in that direction were just about the time when Sherlock Holmes was being built up in my mind. That would be about the year 1886 and 1887. So nobody can say that I formed my opinions on psychic matters very hastily. During these 41 years, I've never lost any opportunity of reading, of studying, and of experimenting on this matter. People ask me, will I write any more Sherlock Holmes stories? I certainly don't think it's at all probable. But as I grow older, the psychic subject always grows in intensity, and one becomes more earnest upon it. And I should think that my few remaining years will probably be devoted much more in that direction than in the direction of literature. But my principal thoughts are that I should extend, if I can, that knowledge which I have on psychic matters and spread it as far as I can to those who have been less fortunate. But for one moment, suppose that I'm taking it upon myself to say that I am the inventor of spiritualism, or that I am even the principal exponent of it. There are many great mediums, many great psychical researchers, investigators of all sorts. All that I can do is to be a gramophone on the subject, to go about, to meet people face to face, to try and make them understand that this thing is not the foolish thing which is so often represented, but that it really is a great philosophy, and, as I think, the basis of all religious improvement in the future of the human race. When I talk on this subject, I'm not talking about what I believe. I'm not talking about what I think. I'm talking about what I know. There's an enormous difference, believe me, between believing a thing and knowing a thing. I'm talking about things that I've handled, that I've seen, that I've heard with my own ears, and always, mind you, in the presence of witnesses. I never risk hallucination. But it was only in the time of the war, when all these splendid young fellows were disappearing from our view, the whole world was saying, well, what's become of them? Where are they? What are they doing now? Have they dissipated into nothing? Or are they still the grand fellows that we used to know? It was only at that time that I realized the overpowering importance to the human race of knowing more about this matter. Then it was that I flung myself more earnestly into it, and that I felt the highest purpose that I could possibly devote the remainder of my life to was trying to bring across to other people something of that knowledge and assurance which I had acquired myself.
Isn't that a fascinating piece of history? The language, the phrasing, the purpose behind his voice. Can you feel that? And Doyle was also friends with Harry Houdini, and was apparently privy to some of the more remarkable esoteric techniques that Houdini had become learned in addition to his stage magic. Just fascinating. Just fascinating. All this zeal for the spiritual philosophy of existence. This delving into the different unofficial, unapproved orders of reality. This meant that a lot of Holmes stories, a lot of Sherlock Holmes fantasies, are embedded with all kinds of tender, mystical observances. And some damned fine analysis of human behaviour. Let me throw a few little pieces of dialogue at you. Holmes said, "Life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man could invent. We would not dare to conceive the things which are really mere commonplaces of existence. If we could fly out of that window, hand in hand, hover over this great city, gently remove the roofs and peep in at the queer things which are going on, the strange coincidences, the plannings, the cross-purposes, the wonderful chains of events, working through the generations and leading to the most outre results, it would make all fiction, with its conventionalities and foreseen conclusions, most stale and unprofitable." So it's insightful and well written, and meaningful and relevant to today. And he explains the way he thinks. Holmes said, "In solving a problem of this sort, the grand thing is to be able to reason backward. That is a very useful accomplishment and a very easy one, but people do not practice it much. In the everyday affairs of life, it is more useful to reason forward, and so the other comes to be neglected. There are 50 who can reason synthetically for one who can reason analytically." Holmes famously once said, "My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people don't know." Are these not the words of every real philosopher, by the way? And in the way that he considers the mind, although Holmes is woefully unemotional in his inability to balance and channel and understand his emotional life, we learn a lot about mental acuity from that extreme angle, even though the extremes to which he takes it are, in the end, inadvisable. We can still learn something from that. And Holmes said in that respect, "I consider that a man's brain originally is like an empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in all the lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at best is jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now the skillful workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. He will have nothing but the tools which may help him in doing his work, but of these he has a large assortment, and all in the most perfect order. It is a mistake to think that the little room has elastic walls and can distend to any extent. Depend upon it, there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useless facts elbowing out the useful ones." So there's all kinds of cool, interesting things to consider there, isn't there? But I think my favourite Holmes quote is a short one, and it is this: "Education never ends, Watson. It is a series of lessons, with the greatest for the last." So I, for one, continually find substance in the tales of Conan Doyle, because I understand his enthusiasm and passion for mystical matters. And his views in this respect, they opposed the ingrained pessimism and racism and bigotry and elitist thinking that, to be honest, were in danger of characterising much of his social class and intellectual community at that time. No, Conan Doyle began to break out from all that. Not perfectly, but he did. He was doing something different. His spiritual inquiries were clearly evolving his consciousness. They were making him a better man. They freed him from the weight of his cultural baggage. They severed the bonds of fake English imperialist thinking and let him loose in the world as a free agent. So, if you read such a person's works with this knowledge, you can track their inner progress through the very words they have laid down in ink. You can see their development on both the psychological and spiritual levels. It's all there. It's all there on the page. They cannot help but tell us about their own particular journeys, ruminations, and discoveries. So such works that have been left for us to enjoy gain a whole new dimension. They do give a real, intimate account of one man's spiritual unfoldment. How fascinating and rewarding to share in that.